Good morning, world. Live from the All America city of Morrisville, this is Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition. And on World Edition, we bring you great news from around the world, talk about innovation, and continue our discussion of what we can do to emerge stronger from this pandemic together. Today, before I begin my monologue, a reminder of East Meets West in Morrisville, a wonderful celebration of diversity and innovation and inclusivity. Tonight's Music at the Hub, and it's sponsored by Radio Naira. Mark Lee has been a guest on that show a few times. It's a South Asian radio station. But we look forward to celebrating diversity in Morrisville. Now, here's my opening remarks today. First of all, we talked about how divided our government was yesterday, but President Biden has uh, succeeded in getting a bipartisan support and bill passed to extend the government being open until October 18th. He says this is a bipartisan win. The Senate and House have joined with him in doing it, although October 18th is a date that the government can remain open. And our Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says that it could be catastrophic if the debt ceiling is removed beyond that time in terms of on hand cash to run the government. More on this in a few weeks. Now, here's my take. So, last night was also a very interesting night in the United States Congress, as we often are used to seeing Democrats unite in times of crisis. We saw them come together during the Obama healthcare bill. We saw them come together during the 2007 financial crisis. And we saw them recently come together to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of vaccinations and masks. We also saw them come together to speak out against the insurrection on democracy on January 6th, charges that President Trump incited those riots. But here's the deal. They're not so united anymore. First of all, we've talked about moderates and progressives, but the issue at hand today is the infrastructure bill. There is support for the infrastructure bill, the $1 billion infrastructure bill. And the concern is progressives do not support it because they're afraid that if they do, the larger $3.5 trillion human infrastructure bill, which we've called, or safety net bill, will not pass. They want those provisions in there. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of how the bill is broken down, but moderates like Senator Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are very adamant that they will not support this human safety bill. Senator Manchin has come out and said that he would support a $1.5 trillion bill, not a $3.5 trillion bill. Now, you might say, well, this has happened before with Democrats. They would be able to uh, overcome this and unite like they did in 2007 or 2000, during the Obama administration, during the debates about the Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. There were differences, but they came together. But I would say the stakes could never be higher for the ability of progressives and moderates to come together and be united. First of all, here's how I'll end this monologue. If the Democrats fail in passing a significant legislation, they would really this would represent a significant failure when one party controls the White House, the US House, and the US Senate. This would be deemed as a tremendous failure for President Biden and would give the Republicans all kinds of ammunition in the midterm elections that this has been an ineffective president. Our president has a lot riding on being able to get something passed through breaking legislation. The second is obviously a divided party. What does this do as they prepare for the midterm elections? A divided Democratic Party would perhaps have more primaries, and it would make it harder to control seats in the House and the Senate. And if the Democrats lose the midterms, then it could be a divided government with a Democratic president, a Republican House and Senate, gridlock, and 2 years later, a presidential race. So the stakes could never have been higher right now. We look forward to seeing this continued saga of unity in the Democratic Party and what it means for the future of this bill, the Human Safety Net bill and the infrastructure bill. My concern is the longer that they wait, the more factions that come in and divide this party, this bill could be dead on arrival. And so here we are today with our guests, Mark Lee, Sasha Starr, who has Economics Monday and the Chess Show. Sasha, thank you so much. And
You're
we're waiting
welcome.
for others today. So, the topic of the day today is, first of all, the infrastructure bill. But because we talk about economics, why don't we start with Biden's extending of the debt ceiling and keeping the government open? Really no surprise. We knew this was going to happen. It's the smoke and mirrors, the constant drama. But economically, I'm a bit concerned, Sasha. What does this kind of debt do when our Treasury Secretary says that it could be catastrophic? I don't like it when people use those terms. What is she referring to?
Well, first of all, remember that delays the same problem just for 2 weeks. Start Monday, you will get to 18th, which is also Monday. So we have just 2 weeks time, and with all the fighting about infrastructure bill and human infrastructure, there will be not even time to devote to this. So comes Monday 18th, there will be shutdown of the government with all the tragic consequences. And I can bet that more than 50% that's exactly what's going to happen. Now it's it's a tragedy, it's a human tragedy really of Democrats, that you are absolutely right. While controlling presidency, house and senate, they are absolute impotence to get anything done. Anything what they're discussing creates more fighting. These progressives are now feel that they're basically operating like a street gangs. They feel that because there are now so many of them, and as long as they will stick together and not to yield even an inch anywhere, they can achieve some results. It doesn't matter whether it's good for country or for their party. It's good for their fraction. So now it's a new concern. It's if before I would say that the U.S. politicians are fighting number one for the good of their country. I hope some of them at least. Then some others fighting for good for their party, and yet some others are fighting for whatever is good for themselves. There is now number four. It's a fighting for the fraction, for their fraction of their own party, and it doesn't look pretty. It looks like from outside where I am in Canada, that looks really pathetic, really, really ugly.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, like Sasha just said, it just sounds like we're stalling the inevitable, just waiting for it to actually happen. And he's definitely, I'm glad that they made this effort to at least stall it. But that's all it sounds like is a stall tactic, like you called it earlier, smoke and mirrors. And then we'll have the same issues later on. And that is where my concern is and everything. And I'm definitely wondering about this infrastructure bill. I understand that they're going to try to bring it to the House floor again today and try to get that through as well. Now, there might be some elements of it that would be good for the entire economy and good for the world, and there might be other parts of it that have got that notorious pork that we know is oftentimes in bills, regardless of who's putting them out there and things of that nature. So, definitely, that's some of my concerns and everything along those lines. So, that would be my immediate thoughts. I did just want to bring up something that, while this is all going on, there are other things that are impacting the economy as well. And one of them, I'm just going to admit something myself because sometimes when things get a little bit too large, you get tempted. So I was tempted. I did spend a couple of dollars, not a lot, because I'm not going to sit there and spend hundreds or hundreds and thousands, as some people may do, not even 10. But I did decide that I would at least invest, or as Sasha would probably say, waste a couple of dollars on a lottery ticket because the U.S. lottery is up to some ridiculous amount. It's like the 10th largest in history. The jackpot is now an estimated $620 million for the Saturday night drawing. So you need to do a lot of hoping, and maybe you're going to go out and get some as well, Steve, because they said that if there's a winning ticket, it would be the 10th largest lottery prize won and still 980 million behind the largest ever, which was a 1.6 billion Powerball prize won in January of 2016. So yeah, if we win, we'll definitely finance some of the things going on that are very important to us, and definitely might even try to help with this great network that we are having part of as well. So far, there's been no winners from North Carolina. So who knows? Maybe we can be the first, Steve. So I don't know what your thoughts are about the lottery, but once it gets to a certain point, you do get tempted. And of course, they always say that it's going for a good cause. Like here in North Carolina, they call it the education lottery because part of it is supposed to go toward funding education. So, what are your thoughts? Do I stand a chance? Either you or Sasha, or did I just throw away? We'll just even say the amount, $4. Did I throw away $4, or do I stand a chance? Even though we know the odds are long, I figured, what the heck?
I don't know. There's always a chance, I mean, I've never been a really big lottery person because I just feel like I don't want to focus on something that may never happen. But people win these things, so I don't know. This, maybe it's your lucky day. I mean, hopefully, we'll see.
We'll
Sasha,
see.
Um, yeah, if we're talking about a couple of dollars here and there, it doesn't really matter. It's your time to go somewhere and pick up the tickets or so on. It's more valuable than this $2 that you're going to spend on it. So either way.
Yeah. Agreed. Definitely agreed. I did want to bring up something else if I can. I don't know what else you had on your mind, Steve, and everything, but it was the whole concept of dollar stores because we talk about things that are being impacted by the industry and by the world and everything. And there was an article earlier today that talked about how the dollar stores are being hit by this pandemic, and that model of the dollar stores is being tested by worker burnout, pressure to raise wages, of course, supply chain problems, and of course, growing local opposition. And of course, they're not being helped at all, in my mind, by things such as Amazon and things along those lines. So definitely there has been some unbridled success of dollar stores and that business model, which of course was benefited from the prevalence of poverty and disinvestment in inner cities and rural America. So dollar stores definitely oftentimes were operating in those areas, and a lot of times that's why they were having a tremendous amount of success. But it does look like they were facing a lot of things, and their sales have been slowing, and some measures of profit are shrinking as the industry struggles with a variety of those challenges that I just mentioned. As a matter of fact, just this week, Dollar Tree, which also operates family dollar stores, said it would start selling more products above a dollar. So, in the past they were selling them under a dollar, but now it's going to start selling more that are above a dollar. But that means $5, $6, or whatever. But you do know that some of these dollar stores, while they call themselves dollar stores, they oftentimes are more than a dollar, and they might be included in that model. So, Sasha, I guess I'll toss that to you. As one that's in that investment space, what do you think about the fact that some of these stores are having to change their model? And part of it is the pandemic. Part of it is the rise of Amazon, where people can just order it from their homes. And I'm sure there are other things, including, as this article said, the wages that they are paying and things along that line. So, what is your thoughts as we are seeing apparently more and more of these closing down? And I imagine the same thing is happening if y'all have dollar stores. And I don't know whether the dollar store model had really made it to Canada, but if y'all have those, I imagine it was impacting that country as well. So I guess my first question is the dollar store model still as prevalent in Canada as it is here in the U.S.? And are you surprised by these economic troubles that dollar stores are having?
Basically, yes, there are some dollar stores in Canada. I don't recall when last time I ever been there. I think it's a viable business model. They're hit with a shortage of workers, they're just hit as many other businesses. Look at the trucking industry.
Mhm.
There is a huge shortage, and it's not only in the United States; it's also in the UK and elsewhere. It's a huge problem, really. I wish they would get on the road trucks that will be driverless, so they will not depend on drivers so much, if it's possible at all. I'm not so sure, but it's a huge problem. That's why the price is going up elsewhere, and apparently the price of oil is going way higher again because of transportation of oil is a very big problem, and without oil there is a big problem with transportation everywhere. Every product, every little thing that you buy will be higher in price because of the transportation costs.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and we will. I still think that these stores are good in terms of providing just basic amenities at a much lower cost than going into a store. Amenities like toilet paper, toothbrushes, different things. Sometimes, I mean, you'd be surprised how many people out there can't afford those basic necessities. And I think there's a market out there for it. I mean, you've got thrift stores as well, other things where will come in. So we'll see what happens. But it's and turning the tide real quickly. The North Carolina Courage coach, which is our professional women's soccer team, resigned amidst allegations of sexual misconduct, and apparently it's happened before for very abrupt firing. So they play tonight or tomorrow, but that'll be the first game I think without the head coach. And we had a good day in North Carolina with our numbers going down below 3,000 for the first time in terms of hospitalizations for a few months. But it goes up, it goes down. Not sure what's going on in Canada, but I think all of us can agree that I thought this was going to be over by October, November, but looks like it could be another. Lots of events are being canceled, things are being pushed back. So, is this the new world?
Could be the
You
new
know?
world. Speaking of new worlds, you just mentioned the situation with the Carolina Courage coach and what was going on in that regard. Apparently, that's going on in other things, and it may be bringing down the end. I mean, it's a long shot, but it may be bringing down the end of a very powerful part of college life, because definitely it does seem that after rape accusations, many of the fraternities, including some of our biggest universities around the area, like UMass, Northwestern, Nebraska, and Iowa, there are lots of protesters centered around what's going on in that kind of culture that exists within some frats, and there's growing anger, and they are saying that there are a larger amount of students that are actually demanding an end to Greek life. I did not pledge, but I do have friends that were pledged, and they were very much involved in that life, and they enjoyed that life, and in a lot of ways that's even how they did some of their business networking, and have definitely built some other lifelong friendships, whether it was business related or whether it was related in other kind of things that are going on. So definitely there have been certain various both formal reports as well as anonymous reports on social media about certain fraternities doing things against women on their campus, and definitely that is putting this rise out there that more and more folks are wanting to look at the very large organization of the Greeks and see if this is something that they want to get rid of. And of course, some of this is being driven by the success of both the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter protest. But it's going to be interesting when that happens, because fraternity officials are even saying that they understand the depth of the students' anger about sexual assault, but that, as they say, the protesters are not seeing the whole picture. She's some of the people, as a matter of fact, Judson Horace, who is president and chief executive of the North American Interfraternity Conference, the largest trade association of fraternities, says we have our challenges, no doubt, just like the governors of states, just like the people who are in media, just like pro athletes, just like entertainment. We are being labeled for a problem that is frankly much larger than a fraternity issue. So they are admitting that there might be some things going on in their various chapters, but they're also saying that a lot of people are appalled by the behavior, and that they're trying to take the correct actions to go against those folks. But it's kind of like even like what happens with the bad police and things of that nature. There was that whole defund the police movement. So this sounds like it's almost like a defund the frats or get rid of the frats kind of movement that is being risen as well. So, as a matter of fact, Mr. Horace said so many frat men are appalled by this behavior, and that fraternity brothers who expelled members should be supported and encouraged, not targeted by protests. They did the right thing. The protests should be directed at the behavior. So I think I'll leave it at that. They're saying that the protests should be directed at the behavior and not necessarily and those that were the cause of the behavior, and not necessarily at the entire organization. So I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about that, because we got, whether it's the police or whether it's now the frats, we do have sometimes people targeting entire organizations or entire institutions when we oftentimes know that it's really the bad actors that are the problem, and we need to find a way to get rid of those, maybe not necessarily the entire institution. So I just wondering what your thoughts were, because this was another article that I had found in the New York Times. And of course, being living near Duke, I do know that sometimes the frats do get in trouble for various bad behaviors. I remember my cousin was in a frat, and I'll get to you, Steve. You'll love this title of the frat. It was called BOG, and it stood for bunch of guys. That's what BOG stood for and everything. And yeah, they were banned for some, I think, drinking violations and some other things. And I don't even know if they're on campus now. I think I had heard that they had come back recently, but they were off campus for a while. But while my cousin was there, they were a typical drinking frat. But what are your thoughts when people are, with the institutions are being attacked and not necessarily the people that are the actual bad actors?
Mark, I was listening very carefully to what you have to say. I'm surprised why you are concentrating on something that just deflects your attention and your listeners from the real issues. This is not a real issue. It's local problems that have to be solved by local organizations and parties, individuals, and so on, and figure out what's the best way to deal with that. The real issue is that right now, one of two major parties in America is actually becoming a party of hatred, the freedom restrictions, and essentially derailing the democracy in the United States. There is absolutely no way that the Democrats should be so dumb, really. I'm trying to be very correct and not upset anybody, but they are concentrating right now on their own political infighting with their fractions, with progressives, and all this real, for a better word, what it is, well, it's real garbage, really. That's all what it is. Instead of reminding people that there is a danger to lose the democracy because of inability to prosecute and find out exactly what's happened on January 6th insurrection. That is not being done. So actually, the Trumpist movement in the Republican Party, actually, there is no Republican Party. It's a party of Trump. And even if he's not going to run, even if he will stay away, it's still a party of Trump because they're religiously following him and his cult. And that is, with all these restrictions of voicing rights of people and so on, it's just absolutely horrible thing. But Democrats are not even talking about that. They're talking about infrastructure, the human infrastructure, unhuman infrastructure, or some other infrastructure. This is really getting people tired, and at the at at the voting polls next year, there will be a backlash on Democrats everywhere. It's not a governing party. They cannot really be in power.
Well, like I said, I'm not sure that I think that either of the parties have been a true governing party for a little bit of time and everything, but that's just my opinion, because I sometimes think that both parties have been doing a disservice to the community at large, and that they are actually more, particularly at the national level, indebted to the lobbies and the lobbyists and special interests. And therefore, I would agree with you on that. Where I may disagree with you on is that it was a localized report, because the story that I was talking about was actually talking about something that is going on throughout the country, and it's probably even going on in other countries as well, because sexual assault on campus is definitely underreported. There is research. Oh, and while the research may be thin, there is some data that shows that more than a quarter, that's 1 out of 4 female undergraduate students, and almost 7% of their male counterparts will experience rape or sexual assault through physical force, violence, or incapacitation, according to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network and Advocacy Group. So definitely, it is an issue that is very pertinent and very real and very one that a lot of folks are concerned about. Now, I do agree with you that Trump does need to be investigated, as though the whole thing that went on with the insurrection and things along that lines. And they're also saying that this college violence is oftentimes closely tied to alcohol abuse and peer support, and isn't necessarily tied to anything intrinsic in the fraternity life. So that I would also agree with, because a lot of times that is part of what is going on as well. But I don't think that we can dismiss the fact that this is a major problem, and that so many women on the campuses of the country, and I would argue the campuses of the world, are feeling threatened by this kind of mentality that exists on the university, where some men feel that they have the right to basically take advantage, and in some cases just like force themselves on these women. So that is not cool by any means in my mind. So for us to belittle that issue is not something that I think is fair.
I have different view on that problem. First of all, for a girl to be sexually assaulted, she has to be already in a room with a boy that she has some kind of a relationship. He's not a stranger to her completely. So she's been dating him for a while or whatever. There is the same class. So for some reason, she decided that it's prudent to be alone with this male student, whatever he is, in a room. Okay. So unless she has a Down syndrome, she has to understand that there are consequences and possible developments that may not be desirable, or maybe they are desirable, but she doesn't want to make it obvious that it is desirable. And if you go in 100,000 years of history of mankind, and even go to see the animals, how they behave, it's always been that the man has to subdue the female species in order to have sex with her and have the kids and some kind of one way or another to procure its own type of species. So that's a natural. Now we have also some cultural phenomena that, this is good, this is not good, you should go that far, or maybe you should not go at all, and maybe you should run away from a girl. If there is a girl on the campus, run away 10,000 meters, and she's not going to be able to catch you because you're a much faster runner than she is, hopefully. If not, then the bad luck, she will chase you down, and then she will report that in fact, he was. It was a devious plot to run away, so she would catch him, and then he would, using that situation, he would abuse her or something. It's really. I mean, if there are abuses, go and report on them, and that's the end of story. What else can you do?
Like I said, we're going to bring. We're going to bring Shaquille into this story and everything, and I see Steve's back and everything. We've been having a lively discussion, even without you, Shaquille, which is a great thing. Sometimes having the lively discussion with you is even better. And we were actually talking about, apparently, and I know that you've oftentimes talked about institutions that have been attacked, like the police, and apparently now there's an attack against fraternities. And part of the attack is that they are saying that women are being more attacked on those campuses, and that date rape is real and things of that nature. So there's even a movement apparently to get rid of Greek life, which I find actually kind of hilarious, because Greek life has been around forever and everything, and we're talking that frat life and all of that. And while I never pledged, I do have friends that have been involved in that life, and they gained some great things out of it, including some business networking opportunities and some lifelong friends and some other things. But yeah, sometimes the culture was very much of one that was about going after the young ladies, and sometimes it might have even been done in a forceful way. So date rape can be a very real thing, but definitely I do not think that we need to ban the frats, just like I don't necessarily think that we need to ban police.
Speaking of, you made me think about Greek food for the frats. And you said Greek, but there is the Greek festival today. I'm getting hungry for. I'm going to go tomorrow. It's only a drive-through, so I was so bummed about that. But I believe fraternities are a good thing in terms of bonding and sororities. We had situations like this when I was at Emory University, and I think as long as there are laws and protocols put in place and people know what the situation is, we shouldn't ban fraternities. But I think we have to monitor them and make sure that we are not abusing it. And I don't know if they have fraternities in Canada or Australia, but this is college guys where you have all kinds of parties and things like that.
So this is such an overwhelming issue. All these young girls are being raped by these men. If I heard what you said, Mark, before I came on, who feel that they have the right to physically hold a girl down and have their way with her. I've met a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. I've never met anyone who views it that way. But apparently all these men happen to be, Gen Z and younger millennials who are going to colleges. And am I understanding this correctly, that it's 1 in 20? It's 5%, sorry? 1 in 5?
1 in 5 what?
1 in 5 women are sexually assaulted. Is that what we're being told at US college campuses? So that's 20% of the population?
They said that according to some data, more than a quarter, that would be 25%, will experience rape or sexual assault through physical force.
More than a quarter. Right. So just to make sure, if I had a daughter and I was an American parent, I should actually say to my daughter, I should say, look, sweetheart, I don't think that you should go to Harvard. I think you would be better off going to Pakistan, because the rate in Islamabad is only 18%. You would be safer in Afghanistan, Suriname, Saudi Arabia. You'd be safer there. You'd be safer in the Congo than what you would be at a US college campus. Is that what we're saying? Is that what the statistics are? Really? Wow, that's really bad. Who would have thought that, Stanford is the same as the Congo? You know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like just another bit of woke political nonsense that is being pushed on everybody, because you're not going to belittle the victims of sexual assault. Why would you? So this is just another way to control people and to divide people and just come up with some ridiculous nonsense to justify it. That's what it sounds like to me.
I hear you. And by the way, Shaquille, I was hoping Nick was going to be here, but I guess I get to be the one that is the bearer of this news and everything. But, sometimes y'all think that I am just like you sometimes say that there are certain things that you believe that I am a supporter of, and sometimes we find out that it is the case, and sometimes we find out that maybe it isn't the case. And I've oftentimes said that one of the things that I am a big supporter of is freedom of press and freedom of us to talk about whatever we feel like talking about. But apparently, and I know that you've been asking this, and I know Nick was going to bring it up on the show if he came up on the show. But since he's not here, and since I'm on the board as well, I will take the responsibility. Apparently, it looks like part of the reason that we are not airing to YouTube is because earlier this week, they decided that some of the things that we said, where we are discussing just kind of general views and giving and sharing our views, went against the policies of the World Health Organization. That is what I learned earlier today, and everything of that nature. So that's why we're not airing, by the way, to YouTube on our standard YouTube channel, because they have taken us down for a week, because they have felt that we are talking too much about things that might be related to the truth. So guess what, Shaquille? We've been impacted by the woke culture right here on the international broadcast media. I just thought you'd get a big kick out of that in knowing that, and knowing that even I recognize that as well.
I don't get any kick out of that. I'd like to know exactly what things YouTube believes that we said that was controversial. All of us have encouraged people to get the vaccine. Some of you believe that it should be done by force. Others question the law on it. But I'd love for YouTube to point out the things that were actually said that they think goes against whose advice.
Apparently, they were thinking that some of the things that we said about the vaccine mandate and about the veracity of our scientists which I agree is not always known to be, and there are differences of opinions in the science community. But apparently, because we have made comments that veracity can definitely be tested and can also be doubted, that is where the issue lies, from what I have been told.
Well, thank you, YouTube. We've asked questions. I can't talk for everybody else. I have asked questions or pointed out that health ministers in different countries and different states are saying different things, and it's confusing for people. And, we would like to see some clarity. And YouTube's way of clarifying that for us is to take us off the air. Thank you.
That is their way of clarifying for us.
That's very helpful.
YouTube TV is taking off NBC. I'm so bummed about that. I gotta go in a few minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and close out. But I wanted to so I apologize to everybody that it's until
no
the next
problem.
few
We'll
weeks.
continue the discussion going for a few minutes.
But I want to give my closing monologue real quick, and then when I come back on Monday, hopefully Shaquille will be there in the beginning so we can talk about what I just talked about my monologue, Shaquille, which is the division between progressives and moderates, and what we can do to what it's going to mean for the safety net bill, the infrastructure bill, and whether all this division is just going to kill the bill eventually. But my final thought is this. I find it to be interesting analyzing Senator Joe Manchin. It's interesting. He's in favor of the child tax credits, reducing prescription drug prices, many of the economic issues, expanding Medicaid and Medicare, but he's also a social conservative. And I think we often forget when we look at Joe Manchin, there's many probably people like him in the center that aren't really on the extreme fringes. So we often hear, well, I'm socially conservative. And, what is it? They say I'm socially economically conservative and social liberal.
Right.
And Joe Manchin is the opposite. He's a social conservative, but economically more progressive. And so he is still a Democrat. For those of you who say, why can Joe Manchin change party? You can't be a Republican if you're for those things that I just said, reducing drug prescription prices, expanding the child tax credit, expanding Medicare and Medicaid, right? But at the same time, he's holding his own on more of the social issues. So I think, and here's my final take, it's not really a jab. I think that's a significant voting bloc in the United States. And I think that they're in more of the rural areas, and they define a lot of times the electoral map. So it's going to be very interesting to see how many of these moderate Democrats are out there, and did they defect when Trump ran to join the Republican Party? So where are they? Are they more of these socially conservative, economically liberal Democrats and Republicans? That's my final thought for you all. We'll talk about it next week. And maybe it bodes well we've talked about this before, guys, a third party. But United States, it's very hard to make a third party happen. Anyway.
I think I personally think it's not necessary either, actually, because in a properly functioning liberal democracy, you do want two parties, one that's left and one that's right. They act as a check and balance against each other so that the laws that they pass are actually fairly centre laws. So you don't need a centrist party because that's how Congress should already be operating. And it's really this like what you said there, Steve, about trying to build the bridge between progressives and moderates. I would actually argue that only helps the Democrats. It doesn't help the country. The bridge that needs to be built is between progressives and conservatives, because the moderates and the Democrats are going to be very similar to moderate Republicans in their viewpoints. They're prepared to understand each other. It's the extreme left and extreme right that won't talk, and that's why you have so much dysfunction. And what ends up happening is, they only get what they want through basically force when they control the House or they control the Senate or something like that, and they can force it through, whether that be progressives or the hard right. And that's where we are seeing a breakdown in this idea that we should attack and destroy our political opponents. We shouldn't be doing that. We need our political opponents to be there to represent the side of the community that we may not be as focused on. The system works as long as we let it work, and as long as we take some of the venom and viciousness out.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and great points. We'll talk about it next week, and we wish everyone safety out there this weekend. I want to wish my colleagues a wonderful weekend. Continue with the show, talk about these things, and I'll be back on Monday to open up again. Thank you.
That sounds great. Hey, Shaquille, you're gonna love this, as will Sasha, because we sometimes talk about things being underreported or overreported or whatever the case may be. But guess what? There's another case of something being they claim underreported, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts about this. But apparently, in a article yesterday was the 30th, they have decided that police killings in America have been undercounted by more than a half over the past 4 decades, according to a new study that raises pointed questions around bias. And yes, I'm talking about racial bias among medical examiners, and highlights the lack of reliable national record keeping on what they say have become a major public health and civil rights issue. The study, conducted by researchers at the University of Washington and published on Thursday in The Lancet, which apparently is a major British medical journal, amounts to one of the most comprehensive looks at the scope of police violence in America and the disproportionate impact on African Americans. Researchers compared information from a federal database known as the National Vital Statistics System, which collects death certificates, with recent data from 3 organizations that track police killings through news reports and public records requests. When going through the evidence and looking at what the evidence implied, they said that they found about 55% of fatal encounters with the police between 1980 and 2018 were listed as another cause of death. So they were saying that there might have been actually police violence, but maybe they called it something else. And we've heard something similar about even there being miscounts and misrepresentation, even with what's going on with the coronavirus as well, and the ways that those are counted also. So I just wondering what your thoughts are when these studies come out and they find that there might be some stark gaps and everything, because the study goes on to give some other figures, and I'll give some of them. They said researchers estimated that over the time period they studied, which roughly tracks the era of the war on drugs and the rise of mass incarceration, nearly 31,000 Americans were killed by the police, with more than 17,000 of them going unaccounted for in official statistics. The study also documented what they said was a stark racial gap. African Americans were 3.5 times as likely to be killed by the police as white Americans, and data on Asian Americans was not included in the study, but Latinos and Native Americans also suffered higher rates of fatal police violence than European Americans. So that's what the study said, and that's what came out yesterday in some magazine in London. So that's what came out. And apparently the states with the highest rates were Oklahoma, Arizona, and Alaska, as well as, this might surprise people since it is known as Chocolate City, the District of Columbia, while the states with the lowest rates were Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Minnesota. And Minnesota might actually surprise people as well, as that's considered somewhat of a, somewhat maybe considered a conservative state and things along those lines. But as I read some of those statistics, does that bother you that there might be some misrepresentation in the way that we are categorizing these deaths if they are police involved? And like I said, I have heard a parallel kind of conversation with what's going on with the way that the virus has been reported as well. Because some people are like, was it actually coronavirus or was it the pneumonia that got them in terms of their death and everything? So just a parallel that may be existing. But what are your thoughts, Shaquille? And like I said, I just found this article today.
You said a lot there, Mark, so I'm not sure which part you want me to respond to.
The underreporting, we'll start from the underreporting of the police death in minority communities, and then maybe we'll talk about whether there's underreporting in Corona and the way that it is impacted as well. So we'll start with what the article was about, which, like I said, it was published in a British magazine.
Well, firstly, of course it bothers me if there is provable racism. Okay, of course I'm bothered by that. I don't know, I haven't read this article that you found.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that would be true. I mean, what are we saying? That the medical examiner is examining a body and saying, well, you've been shot 20 times by the police, but we're going to put down that you died of coronavirus? I mean, what are we saying here? That if it's underreported, we're saying that people have been killed by the police, and it hasn't been classified as a murder or as a police killing. So police-involved killings in every state of the United States are automatically reviewed by, the police integrity unit or some sort of internal police, right? So are we alleging then corruption in these places? And if we are, the places that you just named at the highest levels are all Democrat-controlled places.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we saying? Connecticut is one of the whitest parts of America, isn't it? So the white places are really good, and the Democrat-controlled places are the ones that have got the most. I mean, we can't just find a number and then draw some conclusion from it. I'd have to really see this report to see it. But on the surface, I don't believe that would be an accurate reflection of what's going on.
I understand, and I'd love to hear Sasha's thoughts. But Dr. Christopher Murray, the director of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington, talk about a tongue twister in terms of like a big name for an organization that basically is just studying numbers. But it says, I think the big takeaway is that most people in public health tend to take vital statistics for the U.S. and other countries as the absolute truth. And as it turns out, and as we show, the vital statistics are missing more than half of the police deaths. So I guess what they're trying to say is that, some of these deaths weren't even reported, and who knows why they weren't reported. It could have been the thin blue line. It could have been a variety of people. And then this person said, if you have to look for why those deaths that are being picked up by the open sources investigations, looking in the media and elsewhere, aren't showing up in the official statistics. That does point to the system of medical examiners and the incentives that may exist for them to want to not classify a death as related to police violence. And we do know, at least from
that's the most illogical reasoning I've heard. If the medical examiner does not determine that the person died as a result of their involvement with the police, that's not racism. That's their medical decision, right? Like if the person had a heart attack and 30 seconds later they were shot by the police, it may not necessarily have been the police that shot them, especially if they had a heart attack straight after swallowing a whole heap of drugs because they didn't want the police to find them. But do you know what I mean? Like we need to know what actually happened. What are we actually talking about?
Well, one of the things in this article, they said that pathologists have also complained on occasions that law enforcement does not always provide them with all the relevant information. And I know that even from the Michael Peterson case, which was a case here in North Carolina many years ago, and that they have been pressured to change their opinions, or that coroners, who are usually elected and are not always required to have a medical degree, can and do overrule their findings. I actually find that unusual too, that you would have this person in a very important job and not be required to have a medical degree, but apparently several places in the country you're not. And I did know that in a lot of places you are an elected officer. So it seems to me that there might be some changes needed to be made in the way that we pick this very important job as well, because like I said, usually when we hear about them, it's the ones that are in the high profile cases, and those are the ones that do have some sort of medical background, like what happened with O.J. Simpson, and I can name some other cases as well. So that's another thing that I would be concerned about, is that some of these people jobs that don't necessarily have the training.
But Mark, we're moving a little bit away from the topic. If what you're advocating for is police reform, I'm all for that. I believe in civil liberties, and I believe that police services and governments are supposed to be accountable to the people. So if you're wanting police reform, no problems. But if you're going to try and suggest that it's because black people are disproportionately affected by police and fatal shootings by police, you have to actually have a look at what's going on. The crime rate amongst black communities is significantly higher as well. So they have more police interactions. Now, is that because of, inherent racism, or is it because of something else that's happening? We don't know that. And to draw the conclusion that must be because of racism, I don't think that stands true. We need to actually look at what is causing these sorts of things from happening. And if you're a 15-year-old, boy who's decided to join a gang, your chances of being shot by the police are probably significantly higher than if you're a 15-year-old girl who's on the cheerleading squad. I mean, let's be realistic here.
And I agree with you on that. And I also think that it comes back to something else that you talked about before as well, because I do believe, contrary to what you have sometimes implied that I may not believe in, but I do agree that we do have to go at some of the root causes, which is also kind of the education and the poverty and a number of other things that need to be addressed as well. So definitely, I would think that that is part of the issue as well. And I actually do think that we need a reform of both the prison system and the law enforcement system, including that maybe not having these people in these jobs that they may not necessarily have the correct training for and all of that. So definitely I would agree on you, and that folks may be shocked that we're actually agreeing on a lot as well.
Mark, sorry, but when you say that you want to look at the education system, but you support CRT and Black history and this and that, you don't care too much. You never talk about maths and physics and you know.
No, that's not true. I've talked about math and physics.
Those sorts of subjects.
I've talked about math and physics. I've mentioned the fact that we need to do more around math and physics in our inner city. So don't go there.
In your inner cities, so the poor white kids don't matter. I mean, that's
they need. I'm saying with physics in general, I was fortunate enough that I actually had a physics course when I was in high school and everything, and there was like about 8 of us in there because I was in a small rural town, and not many people were taking physics. And I even remember the physics place. I can even tell you my physics teacher, Miss Lana Boone, or something like that, because I think she was from the Asian countries and had just recently come back here and everything. So definitely, I am a big supporter of us taking those courses. And I can tell you that in those 8 people, and this was some 40 years ago, it was definitely a integrated class. I can put it that way because there was a little bit of everybody, but there was only about 8 of us in that class because it wasn't a popular class. It wasn't something that a lot of people were trying to take, but I did take that class, and I'm glad that I took that class as well. So, and I would want other people to have that same opportunity that I have. I hope that my nephews will be taking physics. I hope they'll be taking calculus. I hope that they'll be taking some of those high-end math courses as they get to those grades that teach those. And I know that my brother would probably be urging them to go in that as well. And it's not because we're trying to push them to be some field that needs that. It's because that's part of a well-rounded education if you can get those kind of courses, and it also can even help with critical thinking. Now, you know, would I discourage them from taking an art class? No, I would not, because, you know, I'm in the art field, but I'm hoping that they're going to continue to have, and they have been having so far, a well-rounded education that would include some of these higher end courses in science. And the same thing if they were some of my friends that live in the suburbs. I would hope that their kids would also be taking those.
In the interest of time, perhaps we could let Sasha make some comments.
All right, sorry. Sasha?
I think that this issue is rather insignificant whatsoever. I don't think we should
Which issue? There were so many of them. Which one?
I don't think we should even discuss that because it's much ado about nothing. Okay, it is. So what supremacists are that black people are more often incarcerated than white people. Okay, so it was the same thing 100 years ago and 50 years ago, and now and probably in the next 50 years will be the same thing. So what is there to discuss really? It's the same thing that if I will try to prove and I will write a huge essay that it's better to be healthy and wealthy than poor and sick. And who would argue about that? Why would they have to prove that? Okay, I could try, but then why would I do it? Why would I spend my and anybody else's time on that?
Speaking of things that we might
because Sasha, what's happened in America is that a group of people that wished to divide the population by, really demoralizing them, decided that they would create a narrative that the United States was founded on racism and is racist today, and every single disparity and every single thing that happens that is a negative result for people who are black, the only cause of that must be something to do with the color of their skin and the inherent racism that exists within the United States and has permeated around the world from the United States. And
Shaquille and Sasha, first off, that's absolutely. But first off, Shaquille and Sasha, as we're winding down, that's absolute BS. Because as I've said before on this show, and I will continue to say, most of the people I know in this field, whether they're people I know personally or whether they're people that I read, they will argue that there are root causes, and it's not just racism. It is a lot of things that you have mentioned as well, Shaquille, which is poverty, which is education, which is a number of other things. If you read and continue to read the narrative, you will see that a lot of that is what is being involved. Do they use race as part of the discussion? Hold on a second.
like that's like you claiming that the Sierra Club is an environmental organization that's moderate. They're not, right?
Like I said, we mentioned that, we looked at that yesterday, and I said that, and me and Nick talked about the Sierra Club, and we found out that the Sierra Club has got some serious things going on in that woke culture. And by the way, there are a lot of people in the African American community that are not the biggest fans of the woke conversation as well, including a friend of mine that I know that is super liberal. You and Carl Kenny would have a great conversation because, as a matter of fact, I think I might bring him on the show because he's probably the opposite of you, but on the liberal side. And I can tell you that he's not the biggest fan.
Of me? I'm
not the biggest fan of the woke culture either. Because
what's the opposite of me? I'm not a partisan. I'm against conservative culture too, Sasha.
Very quick question, Mark. Were there any studies by when we were earlier discussing rapes on campuses? So the rapists are mostly black or white, or it's evenly divided. But also, I'd like to know the victims of the rape on campuses. There are more white victims, or black, or it's equally spread.
My guess, my guess is because it's very popular in the quote unquote HBCUs, and this is just my guess because I don't think the article mentioned that. But my guess is that issue is one that if they destroy the frats, the HBCUs are going to have a serious problem because the HBCUs, including Miss Kamala Harris, were members of that frat sorority and everything of that nature. As a matter of fact, some people would argue that it was the Deltas coming out that helped her and Biden get elected. I mean, that was just one factor. There were others that were out there campaigning very heavily as well, but they were definitely a group that came out very strongly because she, when she was at Howard University, was a member and did pledge in that Delta sorority. So definitely that.
Mark, you're very eloquent.
That kind of abuse is on both sides. And I'm not deflecting the answer. From what I understand, I have friends in that culture in both what are considered PWIs and HBCUs. My understanding is that is an issue that impacts both sides, meaning is it a problem in the African American schools? It is a problem on the white schools. So it is a problem that exists across the board because of things that are going on. And I do agree with you, kind of like the who was it? I think it was Kobe. That if you invite somebody into an environment, depending on the time that you invite them, you might be asking yourself for trouble and everything of that nature. But there is also the flip side of that, where people are doing what they said Cosby did, which is giving people roofies and drugs to actually make it happen and things along those lines. So it depends on how you are going about these kind of things and everything. I know we're getting ready to wrap up. I was going to bring in a world issue because we've been talking so much about the United States, and we are supposed to be a world forum and everything. So apparently, and this is, y'all will get a kick out of this, apparently a country in Europe was almost on the verge of collapse, but now they've got a problem because they vaccinated so well that there is virtually no one left to vaccinate, and that is the country of Portugal. So they said that hospitals in the capital, Lisbon, were overflowing, and the authorities were asking people to treat themselves at home. In the last week of January in that country, nearly 2,000 people died as the virus continued to spread. And the country's vaccine program apparently was in shambles, but 8 months later, Portugal is among the world's leaders in vaccinations, with roughly 86% of its population of 10.3 million people fully vaccinated, and about 98% of all of those eligible for vaccines, meaning anyone over 12, has been fully vaccinated, according to Admiral Govi Emelo. We believe we have reached the point of group protection and nearly herd immunity. So, you know, we've been talking about trying to get herd immunity here in the United States for a while, but it does look like there's a country that has done it, and they say things look very good. On Friday, which is today, Portugal ended nearly all of its coronavirus restrictions, and there has been a sharp drop in new cases to about 650 a day and vanishingly few deaths. So it does look like maybe we got to look at another Western nation as to a way to actually handle this and everything, because they were almost having some serious issues as well. But now apparently the country of Portugal has got things supposedly under control. So, and they are saying that even Portugal could see a setback as the Delta variant does its thing and goes around the country. But right now, Portugal looks good. So I don't know if anybody's got any friends in Portugal, or you got any thoughts about Portugal apparently being the one leading the race to get to herd immunity, and the fact that apparently, even though they had some serious issues back in the day, it looks like they've done well. And I don't know anybody from Portugal, but
keep going, Mark.
Aware of, but
keep
what
going.
are you
Don't stop right here. Just keep going. So what else?
We're at the hour. Thank you.
Well, like I said, I didn't know if y'all had any thoughts, but we are at the hour, so I will now get ready to
Why
bring
would
us
I?
to.
Why would I ever care about Portugal? For what reason? What makes me so concerned about? Oh my God! In Portugal, this happened or that. Oh, nothing happens because they're all vaccinated. What makes my day better or worse for this information? Just explain it to me.
Well, like I said, I thought we
We
were
are
a
the
world.
world edition, in fairness.
It's
We
a
are.
world edition, and so therefore I'm trying to bring a world issue and a world time in here because somebody's watching in Europe or maybe even Portugal might care. So that's why I brought it up because we are the world edition.
But they know this. All you provided is information, which is readily available to any idiot who can read English. So this information is readily available in Portugal, I'm pretty sure. So they have that. What can we? Or okay, I'll talk about myself. What can I add to this information to say yes, I agree, it's very good information? Or say no, it's a lie. I think they're all lying. It's not true. People are dying in Lisbon. There are a corpse on every street or so on. I mean, what would they have to? What is my expected reaction to this information? What should I do about that?
Well, as you
They,
said, we're at the top of the hour, and we'll talk more about this on Monday because today is the Friday edition. But it is my understanding, and if y'all think I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that we are supposed to discuss on the World Edition about issues that people may be finding pertinent here in the United States, whether that race relations, whether that sexual issues, whether that's a number of other issues that are going on here in the United States. But we do call ourselves the World Edition. So sometimes when we are talking, I am also researching things that are going on in the world, be that Haiti, be that Portugal, be that daggone Myanmar or Timbuktu for all I care and everything. But we're trying to bring in conversations that we can then add our insight or our thoughts on those places around the world. I, unfortunately, unlike you and Shaquille, have not traveled all over the world. So therefore, I actually found it to be interesting. And I think some of our listeners may have found it interesting as well. And some of our listeners might have even been able to add insights like the brother did from Brazil, who used to listen regularly on the show in the past. And it is my understanding that Brazil used to be a Portugal or Portuguese colony. So like I said, that's just my knowledge of history and world. So part of the discussion of World Edition, I'm going to wrap up the show with that lovely little symbol that we give, is for us to discuss things around the world. So that's what I would say is the reason I brought it up. If I was
Mark,
wrong,
you just raised a
tell me
very
off the air.
interesting issue. I would be very curious to find out where there are more sexual abuses on campuses, in Portugal or in Brazil. What do you think?
Brazil has got some very serious issues in terms of the way that they handle folks and everything. My guess is Brazil, but I don't know that for a fact. But and this weekend, I will call my good friend and I will go visit my good friend around the corner who is from Brazil. And I will call my other good friend that is a Brazilian musician. Both of them are from Brazil. So I will be able to tell you officially, at least from two sources that I have, and it's only two sources, on next Monday or this coming Monday. So how about that for a plan? And right now I'm getting ready to hit the intro, outro, and we'll just talk about it later. If you want to talk about it offline, we can do that as well.